community.
Father, what about sin? Is it a sin, homosexuality?
I thought you'd ask that one. So you did.
Is it a sin?
You can't say homosexuality as such as a sin, because homosexuality is a term like heterosexuality. Is heterosexuality a sin? I think you have to take the word homosexuality for what it means, and it primarily means a psychosexual attraction, dominant attraction to people of the same sex. So homosexuality as such can't be a sin, just as heterosexuality as such can't be a sin. So even the official church would support that line.
Well then, where does the sin come in?
The sin comes in when we make wrong moral choices in life. And just as where does sin come in heterosexuality? Sin comes in when we exploit other people, use them for selfish sexual motives. Sin comes in homosexuality in the same way, when we physically use our homosexual tendencies if we are that way. So sin is always connected with human freedom, human action, and it's not connected with who we are in ourselves, because to say homosexuality is a sin is in fact to condemn people before perhaps even they know they're homosexuals.
Do you mean you're born like that?
I believe that some people are born homosexual. The scientific community is, in my reading, divided on the origins and causes of homosexuality, whether of men or of women. Mm. I'm convinced of some of the evidence which says that part of our sexual orientation is prenatal. Now, some other elements in the scientific community, particularly those from the psychological angle, will say that our sexual condition is much more environmental, the type of family upbringing we have, etc. Now, even though I believe that part of our sexual conditioning is prenatal, that doesn't explain all the phenomenon of homosexuality, because even with homosexuals, and over the years I've got to know quite a number of them, there are homosexuals who I think are very immoral people, just as there are heterosexuals who are very immoral people. So I don't want to give the impression by saying that because it's prenatal, therefore, there's no problem. There is a problem. But I do think that one of the things that we need to do in the Catholic community is to be a bit dispassionate about this problem. It's obviously an emotional problem, as you're very aware of after this week. What I'm interested in is trying to say, here is a human phenomenon, here is something we need to understand better, to study the causes of it better, and to help people who are of a homosexual condition to genuinely lead moral lives. And I think that's where the problem is, within the Catholic community. It's not on the level of moral teaching or on the level of sin as such, which is pretty well established. I think what the Catholic community needs is much more support for homosexual people, in order precisely to help them to understand themselves, and out of that I think they'll lead much more moral lives, because in my experience with homosexuals, their biggest need in life, or what they experience as their biggest lack, is not necessarily the lack of sexual expression or sexual experience. Their biggest lack is a lack of self-esteem themselves, and a lack of friendship, and a lack of support. And in my belief, a lot of homosexuals are driven to a promiscuous lifestyle or an immoral lifestyle precisely because we don't show Christian compassion and Christian tolerance, which is a different thing from saying, from your original question, is homosexuality a sin? So I wondered from the question.
Yes, okay, now... Sister Maura, you're 45 years a nun, and the awful concern expressed in many cases during the week to us about this particular item, and having Rosemary and Nancy on the show, was that this book would give would imply that every nun in every convent, not only in Ireland but across the world, were there because they were lesbians, and to put it crudely, that they were at it all day, every day with each other. And this is the extraordinary image that was brought across to us. And in your experience, sister, have you had experience of this? Have you come across it? What is the incidence of it, if any? Bearing in mind that nuns in Ireland are extremely cherished people and highly respected, whether they are nursing nuns or teaching nuns or social workers or whatever, they deservedly are highly respected because they are dedicated and devout people and they work towards an ideal. And this seems to tarnish them.
Yes. I'm really rather amazed at the reaction to that, in the sense that it almost looks as if the Irish people imagine that sisters, as soon as they enter a convent, that they leave their sexuality behind. And they forget that they have to live with their humanness and that they take it with them. Now, my experience really has been over a long number of years, and it has been with about 1,200 nuns of our own congregation who are scattered over 22 countries and in about 120 communities. And I have visited and had personal contact with every one of them. And there have been plenty of problems of all sorts, but I haven't met that personally. The fact that I say I haven't met it personally is not to say that it couldn't exist, and that it obviously has existed, because I believe that those stories have been written honestly and truthfully. Therefore, they have happened and they have existed. And it seems to me that the whole reaction to this is to almost put religious on a pedestal where they don't want to be, and almost as if they need a defense, they need to be protected. And I don't think that that is very complimentary to our sisters. And I think that it's a good thing to remember that there are 50 cases mentioned in that book, and that in North America, because it's from North America they come, at the present moment there are over 150,000 sisters. And I think that
the percentage is tiny.
The percentage is very tiny.
Yeah.
And I would say that the percentage is probably pretty much the same as you would meet in society as a whole. And we're part of society as a whole, and we're part of the humanness of our world today. And we can't expect to be protected in a way. And I think that today it's the changes that have taken place in religious life are enormous. The picture of religious life in that book is so totally different from what it is today.
Yes.
Because there is a tremendous stress laid today on the importance of relationships.
Yes.
And if you're not able to build a relationship, you're really not going to live very well in community today.
That great particular friendship bar, is that gone?
That has gone. And I think too that today, with regard to entries into the religious life, the psychological screening and testing that goes on before they go in and while they're in is really a tremendous help, not only to the communities who are receiving them, but to the people who are aspiring to stay in those communities.
Yes.
Because it wouldn't be fair to them to encourage them to try to live a life that they're not able to.
Yes. Nevertheless, what seems surprising to me is in many ways, Nancy and Rosemary, the people writing in this book expressed amazement that normal nuns didn't consider that they, being lesbian, should be allowed to stay in the convent. What astonished me was that their amazement that normal nuns wanted them out, so-called normal, in inverted commas, wanted them out. And they seemed surprised by that.
Many of us had no idea that we were lesbians when we were in religious life. I had never heard the word when I was growing up. I did not discover myself as a lesbian until about 7 or 8 years after I left the convent. After I left religious life, I was in the convent during that period of time that Father mentioned.
And what age were you when you went in?
18.
18, yes.
From 1958 to 1965. I'm
Yes.
45 now, and it's been 20 years since I left the convent. I left the convent, got married, was married for 5 years. I have a daughter who's now 18 and entering college. And it wasn't until, a good time after I left the convent, I'm saying about 8 years, that I discovered the women's movement, feminism, consciousness raising, met women who identified themselves as lesbians, and I gradually came to the consciousness that that's who I had always been, but no one had ever told me. So what the book is doing is opening a door, and it is a kind of time capsule. It is the story of a particular historical period that's passed. However, I must clarify that there are 9 stories in the book by present nuns, women who are still in religious communities today.
Yes.
And
Nancy,
in
how
fact,
long?
one of those nuns, or more than one perhaps, say, as you were pointing out, Sister Maura, this book is very peculiar. I don't know what you're talking about, breaking silence. I never had to keep silence. I never wore a habit. I never lived in a convent. I've lived in an apartment and had a job and driven a car and lived a regular life all the time that I have been in religious life. So even for some of the women in the book who discuss their lives, some of the other stories are an anachronism, and it does move through in a rather chronological way. So I can see you're giving up or being tempted to give up before you get
Nancy,
to the end.
how long were you in?
Does a disservice. I left during my second year. In the novitiate.
And so you found out very quickly you'd made a mistake.
Very quickly.
Why? How did you find out?
Basically because I wasn't happy with the restrictions of religious life at that time, which was in the mid-60s. It had nothing to do with my sexuality, at least not on a conscious level. And the question that you raised earlier, Gay, I don't see that in the book. The women who tell their stories being astonished that I can't even use the word that you use, because of course we are normal. We are all normal. Homosexuality is a normally occurring
you understand the context in which I use it.
In the human race.
It is in attitude.
And the psychological testing that was mentioned as well. Rosemary and I went through a battery of psychological tests. Many.
Yes.
They may be more sophisticated at this point, but we were the cream of the crop of our classes. It wasn't as if they were weeding out misfits. We were the valedictorians and the leaders of our class and the president of Sodality or of the Legion of Mary. We were the cream. The cream,
yes.
Right?
I was definitely recruited. And I admired the sisters, still do. They were my models of intellectual dedication, of spiritual commitment. I wanted to be just like them, and they wanted me to be one of them. And we were subjected to a battery of psychological and intelligence tests. And among those, some of us were selected to go on to institutions of higher learning with the intention that we would be the high school and college teachers, that we would be the leaders of the community. And I was in that narrow group, so we were selected.
Yes. So where have we got so far? We've got that they are experiences of 20, 25 years ago, and circumstances have changed. Just the American experience purely you're talking about.
And Canadian.
It is and Canadian. A relatively tiny minority of people. And Father, do you see... Reading the accounts, I found that some of them were not able to square the incompatibility of active lesbianism with their vow of chastity and celibacy.
Yes, Gay, I was particularly interested in those sisters who have remained in the convent. 2 of them made a very deep and positive impression on me, speaking very openly about their lesbianism, but showing how they had come to terms with accepting their own lesbianism and accepting the ideal of celibacy. I was a bit disturbed by some of the others. At least it didn't square with the idea I have of religious life, where one or two of them openly admitted to living with their lover and not doing it, in my view, very honestly. Doing it and saying that they accept, the spirit of the vows or whatever. But I think if you're talking about religious life, just to take it on that level, you're talking firstly about something that comes out of a fundamentally religious experience. One enters religious life, as no doubt Nancy and Rosemary did, for primarily religious reasons. You're out of religious experience. The vows then make sense insofar as they give a sort of a moral shape to that religious commitment. They tell you, what your sort of fundamental values should be, And they also imply, in my view, a particular style of life. Now, you can say that, maybe we religious aren't very good in our particular styles of life, but just as the vow of poverty should imply a particular style of life, so I think the vow of celibacy has practical implications. And I really had difficulty with some of the sisters who seemed to admit to having open
relationships.
Just as I would have difficulties with heterosexual nun or member of a religious order who had an open relationship and wasn't prepared to question it in the light of their vows. It's not that these things don't happen, but it's the real difficulty, I suppose, I had a lot of the time was what moral criteria, what moral values are being used to judge people's attitudes or people's behaviour. And I say my difficulty with some of the present sisters was they were too easily accepting a rejection of their vows and not really critiquing it in what I would call a moral way.
Yes, mind you, it's superfluous to accuse them of immaturity because we're only 18, 19, 20 years of age and they've a perfect right to be immature, I suppose, going in at that age. Can you account, there are people watching this show tonight, Rosemary and Nancy, who are firmly convinced that if you came on you would have horns sticking out of your heads and you would have cloven hooves.
Oh, you didn't notice?
Yeah, we have noticed. Can you account, Father, for the depth of feeling about this particular subject, which we experienced during the week, whether you did or not?
My explanation of that, and I didn't have any particular experience during the week, I may have it tomorrow, when someone finds out. I think a lot of people are actually uneasy with their sexuality. And it's not a specifically homosexual question. But a lot of people haven't come to terms with their own sexuality, and because they haven't come to terms with it, they sort of defend themselves by attacking other people. So I would place it in that general category. And I'd also say, with regard to the question of homosexuality, that one of the reasons for a lot of the sort of passionate discussion is downright prejudice, downright intolerance. And if I can be personal here, I think 10, 12 years ago, I had a stereotyped image of homosexuals. I'd only read about them and perhaps had read part of the literature and had a certain stereotyped image. Over my years as a priest, I've met many homosexual men and women, and that stereotyped image just simply doesn't work. And these are ordinary people who are struggling. I'm not saying all of them are very moral or leading good lives or lives that I would approve of. But the prejudice is, I think, that people can't accept that ordinary people, perhaps people they know, might be homosexual. And they feel that as a threat. And I would love if, one of the results of this discussion would be that people would calm down a little bit and say, this is a serious topic in itself, also has very serious moral and religious questions attached to it, at least from my perspective.
Indeed.
And that we won't understand the topic of homosexuality till we have a little more knowledge and a little more understanding.
That's not a bad note on which to end. Father, thank you very much indeed. Is that it, Dennis? We're way over. Okay. We are way over. We have to thank you, Pres, for the additional time. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I know there's one last clue. Father Raphael Gallagher and Sister Maura, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And Nancy and Rosemary, thank you.